My book, The Greenway Imperative, the reason that I wanted to write this was to tell the story or stories of these fantastic communities that I had a chance to work with over the past 35 years. What were some of the obstacles that they overcame in terms of building their greenway systems or conserving a valuable open space? Um, and also, I think this is like the first book, in my opinion, in the last 30 years that's really talked about the people behind the movement and how they came together to overcome those challenges.
I think that I'm trying to address the urgent need that we have in America and really around the world to save the remaining wildlands and waters uh, in terms of conservation, and also responding to the fact that the human impact on the planet, there's a need to restore these lands and waters that have been impacted by development. I also feel like greenways are basically about connections, connecting us to the nature, connecting us to each other, connecting us to our communities. And I feel like over time, as populations have grown and our communities have grown, that we've sort of lost those connections. And I wrote about this sort of urgent sense of urgency before the COVID-19 pandemic. So these were issues that I was contemplating, for the past few years. And this book really contains a series of stories that talk about how people overcame challenges and made these connections in their communities. Also, I think as we look ahead to the society as it's evolving and the benefits that greenways bestow, certainly the pandemic is pointing out the need to focus on health and wellness, but greenways offer so many benefits: transportation, conservation, connections to our communities, the preservation of cultural and natural resources. So I do feel like greenways are an imperative, that they're responding to urgent needs that we have in our society today, and that the book really highlights how people have gone on to tackle these challenges and resolve those. Well, first of all, I love this collection of the projects. There are 10, and the range of projects is pretty fascinating in terms of the themes, what the topics that they address, from conservation to transportation, health and wellness aspects, economic development. So I really wanted to select a range that showed you how greenways respond to all different kinds of challenges and opportunities. The second was the geographic range of the projects themselves, and the fact that these projects take place in communities that people are very familiar with: Charleston, South Carolina, Miami, Florida, Las Vegas, Nevada, the Grand Canyon. As one book reviewer has already pointed out, these are projects that everyone's going to be familiar with. These are landscapes and communities that you've been in, and now you get to see those communities from the perspective of greenway development. And then I felt like as the book proceeds, it gives you lessons learned, things that you can take away and use in your community. So I wanted to have that full range of possibilities as you read through each story. You get a sense of the breadth of greenways, the depth of greenways, and what you might take away and use in your community. Well, who doesn't love a story? We've been telling stories for all the time that we've been around as human beings. We've been passing stories on one to the other. The other thing was I felt like there were so many technical books already in the marketplace. This is the first book in more than 30 years that focuses on the human side of building greenways and takes people through the challenges of problem solving. So problems are identified at the very beginning of every chapter, and then you get the process, you get the story of how people took on those challenges and resolved them. So hopefully, using this writing style, it's a way of holding the interest of the reader a little bit longer, delivering some technical information, but doing it in a fun, whimsical way at times, in a way in which I'm able to hold the reader's attention as they work through the different kinds of problems that were taken on and resolved. Well, I feel like it's really put a laser-like focus on the impact that 8 billion people are having on the planet's ecological systems. Granted, I think a lot of people have been talking about this, but maybe people haven't really appreciated how interconnected everything is on this planet and how vulnerable we are as a species. There is this concept of One Health in which we recognize that we are integral to nature, that we're connected to the plants and animals and the ecosystems of the planet. And critically, when one element gets sick, the rest of it gets sick. So, we have to do a better job, I think, of being better stewards of these resources, being better managers of the ecosystems and the microclimates that we live in. Now, in my opinion, greenways are a really good outlet for doing that because greenways are all about balancing the needs of man and the needs of nature. I think it's a great intersection where these two are done well. I think historically, though, greenway advocates have focused too much on trail tread, and not enough on corridor. And so I'm hoping that coming out of the pandemic, there's a sense or a chance for all of us to focus more on the corridors of land and water that we're putting together to host people in the landscape. And I think finally, just as greenway systems have evolved, they've really grown. They're getting bigger and bigger. We're at a tipping point, in my opinion, where we can really connect the North American continent certainly across the United States together with an interconnected system of greenways, as was envisioned by landscape architect Warren Manning more than 100 years ago. So I think that's one of the future visions that's really talked about in the book in chapter 11, and one of the things I really hope will happen long term.
So here's a preview of just a couple of chapters and what was overcome in developing these greenways. I start with Grand Forks because that was a community that was flooded. Both Grand Forks, North Dakota, East Grand Forks, Minnesota, 500-year flood event that occurred, and it was an incredible challenge. And here we come in with a greenway solution. I worked with the Army Corps of Engineers initially, and then was hired by the city of Grand Forks. And honestly, nobody thought about a greenway solution. It was actually a recommendation of a congressman. And 20 plus years later, this is the heartbeat, the heart and soul of the community. It's a landscape that's very adaptable to the conditions. It gets flooded all the time. And so this is chapter 2, Come Hell and High Water. It tells the story of the impact and the recovery process that folks went through in developing this 2,000-acre greenway. Completely different story, similar time frame, 1997. Jeff Olson calls, a good friend of mine, Bob Stearns, Dan Burden, many others. We went out as volunteers to Grand Canyon National Park. The South Rim, which gets over 5 million visitors a year, had been suffering a lot from overcrowding. There was an idea for a greenway. We were brought in as volunteers to work with the National Park Service and develop this greenway. And so chapter 4 talks about the process that we went through as volunteers of basically launching the concept. And then my company, Greenways Incorporated, was hired to actually do the about 6 phases of design, along with Peter Axelson, Beneficial Designs, Bob Stearns, of Urban Edges. And one of the great benefits today is you can rent a bike at Grand Canyon. That was something you couldn't have done prior to our work being undertaken. So it's a really great story of how that whole process came about. Another completely different story is one of urban growth. Las Vegas is the poster child in America for rapid urban growth, a community that's grown to 2.2 million people in less than 200 years. And one of America's fastest growing communities. And what's the value of open space and green space? And certainly Vegas, has started late in the game. And chapter 5, open space in Vegas, is a sure bet. It tells the story that I think it's really worth sharing about how the city, Las Vegas, Clark County, Southern Nevada embraced the concept of greenways and trails, and how they've gone on to really develop a really great network across the region. Another really fascinating story for me was the work in Miami with the Trust for Public Land and the Miami River Commission. When I went down there in 1999, citizens in Miami didn't know there was a river in the downtown, and they didn't know their city was named after the river. So this was a fascinating project to get involved in, to reveal this really unique natural and cultural landscape, which is so vital to the city. And it's taken a long time for this project to come online, but it's a really fascinating journey through this urban development process. And the chapter 6, Miami Means Sweetwater, talks about that in more detail. Um, in a more recent sort of work, back in 2005, went down to work with Charleston County, South Carolina. The citizens had passed a sales tax on themselves to generate funds, about $250 million, to preserve green space. And so with little more than the language and the bond referendum in hand, I worked with a local community group there, citizens group, to develop a plan for preserving 40,000 acres of green space. Originally, the plan was to do that in 25 years, but they accomplished it in 11 years. I think this is one of the most outstanding open space conservation programs in America, and it's just again a really fascinating story to tell and share with other folks. It was really fortunate to have a chance to work with the Walton Family Foundation. Again, the same kind of team: Jeff Olson, Bob Stearns, myself, Tom Woody, others. Went out to Northwest Arkansas, had a concept for linking together 6 cities in the region with a 36-mile Razorback Greenway. Just a great project. It's really changed the culture of Northwest Arkansas. The job was started roughly around 2010, completed in 2015, and now Northwest Arkansas is known not only throughout this country but worldwide for its support and culture for bicycling, non-motorized transportation, outdoor activities, and that's a really fun story to share with the readers. And the last 2 chapters really focus on long-distance trails and greenways. The first is the story of the East Coast Greenway, which surprisingly has never really been written, but it's a fascinating story of a group of people getting together in New York City in the 1990s and coming up with this concept of a long-distance greenway, and then 25 years later, really that all coming to fruition with the establishment of a 3,000-mile greenway. Now it's not all in the way that it was originally envisioned as an off-road greenway, but many people now are really riding it from end to end, and it serves 15 states, 450 cities. It's 3,000 miles in length, and there's upwards of 30 or 40 million people that are using the East Coast Greenway each and every year. So highly impactful greenway. And then this leads to the last chapter, a vision that I wanted to share about a coast-to-coast greenway system for America, really built along the lines of what Warren Manning laid out in 1919, this interconnected network of greenways that would connect the national parks. This was his vision over 100 years ago. And today, I think we're closer than we've ever been, especially with the establishment of regional greenways, of putting this on the ground and getting this developed. So it's again a story really worth sharing with folks, and the vision, and talking about all the history that has gone before us, the legislative history at the federal level, of the different types of people that have been involved in shepherding this vision along. So that's how the book concludes.